All right, so my last video got a fair few views, some comments, some good comments. It actually caused me to come up with what I was going to say for this video. I had something else planned, but I think this is more important. We're going to talk a little bit about the public faces of the separation movement, right? And by public faces, I'm not talking about YouTubers or people on X. I'm talking about the guys who show up on the news in one way or another. And then we're going to talk about the difference between a simple statement and what's behind the simple statement. We're going to rebut some of the arguments that are raised in favor of separation, because that's how a debate works. Somebody makes an argument, it gets challenged. Survives the challenge, or it does not. So, some of these popular faces. Dave Parker. David Parker, I suppose is his proper name. I don't know what he prefers. He was responsible for Take Back Alberta. He likes to say that he was responsible for Premier Kenney getting a boot. He's also in charge of the Centurion Project, which recently made the news for getting its hands on a voter list that it wasn't supposed to have. I don't take Dave Parker seriously. I don't even listen to his arguments. When I look at his X profile and things he has said publicly, the polite term I would use is Dave Parker is a professional agitator. He likes to stir things up, at least in my opinion. And that can be seen in his X posts, because occasionally he'll say something like, "This was my greatest troll," referring to telling people he had gone to Texas after the Centurion Project thing came out. He winds people up, but he focuses mostly on the angry folks. And I'm sorry, you can't go into a decision like this based on your emotion. You have to use your logic. Every decision I made that was based on emotion did not always turn out in the best interests as to how I thought it was going to. All right, so that's Dave Parker. And we have Mitch Sylvester and Jeffrey Rath. I'm trying to remember the name of the group that they run, and it escapes me. I'll put it up on the screen here when I get home and I can look it up. Mitch Sylvester is passionate and occasionally says things that make me raise my eyebrows as far as to potentially how factual they are, as opposed to how conspirational they are. And Jeff Rath, he's just an angry guy. I haven't seen him in a single interview where he didn't visibly start to get angry and call folks out. Those two, I don't pay much attention to them either. Again, they're speaking to the hardcore. They're preaching to the choir. They're not convincing anybody that they've got a plan or that their plan is the correct plan. They're just venting grievances. That's all I see when I look at their stuff. And I'm a middle of the road guy. I think of myself as a centrist. I believe I am a centrist. I was ready to vote for Poilievre. Then I voted for Carney. If Carney had run for the Conservatives, I'd have voted for Carney. That's just how it is. The fellow who runs the Whistle Stop Cafe, whose name also escapes me, he's got a group going. I'll be honest, I haven't seen any of his stuff, but I know he's going from town to town and having town halls, so he's doing his thing. And then we have Keith Wilson out of St. Albert. Wilson's a pretty smart guy. I'll give him that. He's a lawyer, So's Jeffrey Rath, maybe. I've heard varying opinions on that. Keith Wilson's pretty calm. I get the sense that he truly believes what he's saying, and that he has, in his heart, he believes his is the path to take. When he speaks, he's calm, doesn't get overly excited that I've seen, and he tends to say things that people can latch onto, right? He keeps his quotes short, doesn't get too in-depth, gives them lots of little sound bites. Some of those sound bites I saw in response to my last video. And that's where we're going to start to have our debate. The statement was made. 40 countries have been created since 1990. It works for them, and therefore a theoretical template exists as to how separation works, and that it would be good for us. The truth of that, there have been over 30 countries created since 1990. It's not 40. It's not around 40. It was 34. When I look that up, if I'm off, it'll also show up. Since 1990. 16 of those countries were created when the USSR collapsed. So that's not really a country looking to separate. That's a country disintegrating. All right. Next on that list was the what's the word I'm looking for? Disintegration of Yugoslavia, which, depending on how you want to look on the numbers, created 6 or 7 different countries. There's a way that works. Because one of the countries created when Yugoslavia came apart then went on to separate into 2 other countries. In Africa, you're looking at Eritrea, and a few other countries were created. And then the big one that I would consider the successful of the bunch would be Germany, which wasn't a split, it was a reunification when the wall came down. So yes, new countries have been created since 1990. There's no arguing that. I'm going to run a list of those countries off to the side or above my head in this video, depending on how it comes out in editing. And I want you to look at these countries as they come by the screen and ask yourself, would I want to live there? Because there is a difference between successfully separating and creating a new country and becoming a successful country. They are not the same. So while the statement it made is essentially correct, yes, multiple countries have been made since 1990. What it's leaving out is the fact that the vast majority of them, your average Westerner would not want to live in. They don't have a quality of life and the systems in place for your average Canadian to want to be there. All right. The most successful of the bunch, the one that knocked it out of the park as far as I'm concerned, is Germany. Germany's a pretty advanced country. It's got a good GDP. And when they reunified, they really did do very well. Because prior to that, East Germany was not doing well. So this is a good thing. The next thing Mr. Wilson tends to bring up is the fact that the federal government does very little for us. And that we can use his quote, not mine, the $28 billion in overpayment, as he sees it, for transfer payments, that we would reclaim by becoming separate. All right, so let's get into this. Transfer payments aren't payments. No check is written with the subject title transfer payment. Every Canadian pays taxes. Those taxes go into a common kitty. The federal government then divvies those out with the intent of the stronger provinces helping the weaker provinces. Alberta has the experience of being a stronger province. Now, you can argue whether that should go up, down, go away. I'm not here to argue that. I'm here to talk about how much it actually costs and where that money's going to come from. Now, if we separate, federal taxes stop. So now you're paying out of provincial taxes. The only way you recover that $28 billion is if Albertan employees keep paying, which kind of contradicts the common argument of if we separate, taxes are going to go down. Maybe they're going to go down, but I don't see how. Alberta government doesn't write a check. You do, every 2 weeks. So yes, if we separate, federal taxes go away, Alberta taxes remain because you're in Alberta, but they're going to have to come up with some way to make the difference. And what are they going to be paying for? My friend Mr. Wilson points out that the Alberta government looks after parks, and they do, and that they look after Border Patrol, and they do. And in particular with Border Patrol, he says, that's easy, we can do it cheaper. I question that. Because for starters, as a separate country, we're not going to have just one border on the southern line. We're going to have 4. If you're a separate country from Canada and you want to enforce your territorial borders, you need to maintain the current border force on the southern border between us and the United States. You need to implement a border force on the eastern border, stretching from the bottom to the top through Lloydminster, which is going to become its own issue. You have to have some form of border enforcement, probably not heavy, because I'm not sure how many roads go across the northern border. But we have a northern border, that needs to be secured. And then you're going to have the western border with British Columbia. So whatever we're currently paying for border protection on the southern border, all of a sudden we have roughly 6 times the amount of border after separation than we do currently. More, because the southern border is shorter than the northern border or the eastern and western borders. That's going to come out of this, quote, $28 billion that they're going to have to raise Albertan taxes for because nobody's paying federal tax anymore, and there's no way your provincial employment taxes are going to make that shortfall. See what happens? It's really easy to make a common statement. But once you start digging into the weeds a little bit, it's a hell of a lot more complex. Another thing Mr. Wilson said in one of his videos there, he was talking to people about how you debunk the myths of separation over Christmas. So it was 5 months old, but I was watching it, and the man's a very good speaker. He's eloquent enough. Was that we can negotiate from a position of power after we separate. Because BC needs Alberta to reach the rest of the country. He's not entirely wrong there either. All of the major highways run through Alberta. And yes, you could go to BC and say, if you want to ship your wines and your wood products and all that stuff through Alberta, you got to let us send oil. And you could look to the east and say, if you guys want all of your cargo that is landing in Vancouver to ride rail and travel Alberta highways, you got to let us ship oil. Sure, you got a position of power. But you got to remember, so does the other guy when that happens. What immediately happens thereafter is BC says, oh, okay, you can't ship oil. And they shut down TMX. And immediately, like within the hour, the coffers of Alberta start to drain. Because that's where we're getting our money from. We will not have a federation of provinces to back us up financially, morally, with moral support, or legally. We're the lone actor. BC will suffer, and the rest of Canada will help them with that. You don't have a position of power because both sides have the same trigger. The only exit for Alberta is through the U.S. Good luck getting a pipeline through the West Coast states because there's not a lot of difference on the West Coast, whether you're in the U.S. or BC. They're not keen on pipelines, and that's going to be an issue. So those are the ones we're going to start with. That $28 billion that folks say is going to become available is reliant on federal taxes. We're not going to be paying any. So your Alberta taxes go up. How much they go up? Probably not as much as your federal taxes, but they are absolutely going to go up. The costs of taking over Border Patrol are going to be higher than anticipated because you're simply going to have more border. And if you really want your position of power, you're going to have to secure it. The costs of parks we're going to have to take on. That means if we're not paying federal taxes, your provincial taxes are going to have to go up in order to do that. NAVCAN, which is what allows the planes to fly over Alberta, doesn't belong to us. It belongs to Canada. So you're either going to have to create your own entity in very short order, or you're going to have to pay a foreign government, Canada, to continue to run that system so that you can fly to Mexico in January on your vacation. Again, we're not paying federal taxes. Alberta taxes are going to have to go up to pay for that. You get nothing for free, even when you think you're getting it for free. So it's not as rosy as they put it out with we can do it better, we can do it cheaper. No, it's the same as the whole we'll build our own military. Sure, your $28 billion excess dollars that are coming from no more equalization and increased Alberta taxes. Just get into Google and find out how much the 16 F-35s that are currently contracted are going to cost. We're not as big as Canada, but we're still going to need some planes. We still have a fair amount of space to cover. We're still bigger than Great Britain. Or rifles. You're going to build a military. Where are the rifles coming from? Unless we're going to send them out with hunting rifles. Could be done, I suppose. Not the most effective means of arming a military. Training them. All of these costs are going to come out of that $28 billion that Mr. Wilson says is going to make our life so easy. But that $28 billion still has to come out of your pocket, one way or the other. There's just no way around it. Can't just print money. So, I respect Mr. Wilson. Like I said, I think he believes in what he's saying. I think he believes his heart is in the right place. I do not agree with him. I don't agree with his approach. I don't agree with his justifications. I find problems when I look at them. But I can tell you, if I was just to sit down and not do any research, he talks a good game. He's convincing. But the minute you start to actually start looking into how his thing is going to work, it starts to fall apart. Anyway, folks, I do appreciate the discussions we've been having in the comments. I accept the ones that don't seem to be overly useful or constructive. You want to vent? Go ahead. The logarithm picks up the comment. It doesn't care whether you told me to go stuff myself or whether you wanted to have a debate. To those of you who put up the constructive comments, particularly the ones that make me go out and look stuff up, like today, I actually appreciate that. I don't have a problem debating a difference of opinions. I don't have to agree with you, but it does help me understand. So, you folks have a wonderful day. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you next time. Take care now.